And joining us this morning is Carlos Conde of the Human Rights Watch.
Good morning,
Malacanang has often said this is not an issue of press freedom. Is it?
Well, it's definitely an issue of press freedom. I mean, look, franchises, congressional franchises are supposed to be done, ano lang yan parang formality and everything. The fact that it is being talked about, that it is being held up, the fact that people, journalists feel they're being threatened, this becomes an issue of press freedom. Obviously, there's some calculation on the part of Malacanang or of the executive department to try to, block the franchise renewal. That makes it political. That makes it an issue of press freedom.
There's a lot of issues. You're hearing Speaker Alan Cayetano, also Senator Grace Poe, talk about the 11,000 employees of Abs-Cbn, that Abs-Cbn can operate until 2022. But without a congressional hearing, what is the effect, Carlos, of such a setup?
That's a problematic proposal as far as we're concerned. I mean, look, under the law, they should have decided on the franchise renewal early on, and in fact not beyond March 30, which is what's in the franchise, the original franchise. Now they're saying it's going to be, they're not going to be. Abs-Cbn will continue to operate until 2022. Fine, but it's why are you holding it up? Why are you, putting up these roadblocks to the official franchise renewal? So clearly something is being manipulated here. Somebody or something is trying to put Abs-Cbn on a very, very precarious position. Now, I wouldn't like the idea of Abs-Cbn operating for the next 2 years. Na hindi alam kung whether they're going to be having a franchise or not, whether they're going to operate beyond 2022. It's not a consolation that they're saying it can operate until 2022. They should do their jobs. They should tackle the franchise renewal as they have on other businesses.
And what is the effect of that, editorially speaking?
Well, it
doesn't have to be Abs-Cbn, any network.
Yeah, that it communicates to media companies, not just Abs-Cbn, that look, you are warned here. Toe our line, and we won't be giving you this difficulties in renewing your franchise. They're like saying now, look, GMA or other networks, if you want to make sure that by the time you are going to renew your franchise, you will not get all this trouble that Abs-Cbn is getting, toe our line. And don't be critical. Don't, huwag kayong banat ng banat sa amin. Don't write or report about the drug war and other such policies. That is one of the effects of this, and it goes right into the matter of press freedom and freedom of expression.
Yeah. What else are the other options, given that Congress isn't hearing the franchise issue, and there's a quo warranto petition against Abs-Cbn?
Well, the thing is, I think that limits the option of Abs-Cbn. Okay, although they're saying that the franchise is only for the broadcast TV and the radio. It doesn't cover online, the internet, and all these other platforms that the Abs-Cbn had. But that's, it's a small consolation. Okay, it's not to the credit of government that Abs-Cbn has a cable channel or has a robust online presence. It's not. The government's duty is to make sure that, one, Abs-Cbn follows the law and issues the franchise renewal according to that law. And it really, it's a very disingenuous concept that the government can just use application for renewal as a weapon to try to intimidate Abs-Cbn or to try to settle scores with Abs-Cbn or other media network. It's not disingenuous. It's a very dangerous method to deal with media criticism.
No, this government has had some success, in not just some success, major success using the quo warranto petition, unseating no less than a sitting Chief Justice at one point. Right? And this is the second time they're using a quo warranto petition again. Well,
it is, they have weaponized the law in many respects. I mean, it's not just against Abs-Cbn. It's obviously, they used this against then Chief Justice Sereno, and they've used other legal means to try to intimidate and shut down Rappler, for instance. I mean, they've weaponized the law, and really, it just tells you how determined they are in trying to stop ABS-CBN. And the way I look at it, the quo warranto petition should be taken also alongside the franchise renewal in Congress. Many people say, oh, the quo warranto has nothing to do with the franchise renewal. Of course, it has everything to do with it. You know, the quo warranto petition has the effect of unduly influencing or pressuring the congressmen, the legislators who are deliberating on the franchise. I mean, we would be stupid not to think of the quo warranto as the one of the 1-2 punch that we're talking about. You know, the second punch would be the denial of the franchise by Congress. But really, it is to the credit of this government, particularly Solicitor General Calida, he has found a way to use the law, you know, a very shrewd, clever way of using the law. Which can only happen, the quo warranto can only happen if you have control of the Supreme Court, which is why they put this issue right to the Supreme Court, and they have control of the Supreme Court. So it's almost, people are saying it's a foregone conclusion that the quo warranto petition will be decided in favor of the government.
Do you believe that?
Well, only because they have control of the Supreme Court. Again, the quo warranto wouldn't work if they didn't have the control of the Supreme Court. So I think ABS-CBN should prepare for the worst, and really it's not, you know, again, it shows you the determination of this government to really shut down ABS-CBN and send a message to the media that, look, you cannot be critical, you cannot always be critical of the government, and really this sends a signal to journalists, not just ABS-CBN but to the others, that they are very, very vulnerable. And if you take that in the context of how this government has tried to undermine the press for the past 3 years, using not just the president himself, but social media, their officials, it's actually a pretty scary scenario we're having here. The government has taken a lot of weapons, a lot of tools, and used it against critics, not just journalists, but also against activists, so civil society actors, even people who are not that political. They've used a lot of means to try to intimidate them, and this is just one of them.
What other recourse is there? Because the issue with the first quo warranto petition against CJ Sereno was that it was beyond the jurisdiction, technically, of the Supreme Court in terms of removing a sitting Chief Justice. It should be under the law by impeachment, and yet it happened. So in this particular situation, you do have some congressmen who have already said that is not the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, not when it comes to renewing franchises. It is solely in the power of Congress.
Which is why the best way to address this for now is for Congress, for the Committee on Franchise, to act on the franchise renewal as soon as they can. Because what happens is that when the Supreme Court decides in favor of the government or the quo warranto petition, in fact, some of the congressmen have already said when that happens, they will be put in a position, a very difficult position. I mean, and given the popularity of this president, given the fact that his party controls the Congress, you know, the possibilities are endless for this government to try to shut down ABS-CBN. So really, you know, the government has shown, the Solicitor General has shown that they have the capacity and the willpower to try to bend the law according to their wishes. And that's not going, you know, I'm sorry to say, but I think they're going to be doing that in the case of ABS-CBN. They did that with Sereno, they're going to be using that in the case of ABS-CBN. And what makes this all the more problematic is that this has a political component, which is in the case of, you know, we're dealing not just with the Supreme Court, but with Congress and with the PDP Laban, the President's Party controlling Congress. You know, God knows what can happen there.
I'm sure you've read the quo warranto petition. I mean, specifically, they've mentioned 3 major points. Yeah. Essentially, the pay-per-view, the KBO of ABS-CBN,
PDR.
The issuing PDRs to foreigners. Right now, I can't remember just the other one right now, but would that be frankly enough to shut down any TV network?
Well,
under the law, would that already be enough?
The thing is, if they found that ABS-CBN violated its terms of franchise, this should have been taken up at the NTC, which is, you know, the proper body, and a regional trial court or some such. You know, the PDR issue, which is the same issue that they use against Rappler. I mean, that's a very disingenuous argument there. I mean, because they're saying under the Constitution only, foreigners cannot own media companies. But under the Constitution, it says media companies should only be owned and managed by Filipinos. Now, PDRs don't do that. It's just an investment vehicle. So, there are no foreign investors roaming around the ABS-CBN network directing what story to cover or what issues to prop up. It's a very disingenuous way. But again, they can find all the arguments. They can find every justification to attack or to try to shut down ABS-CBN. They have all the resources to do that. So when they really want to bend the law, they can do that, which is why what we're saying is that the public should really come out against this. Activists should really, denounce this. They should make representations in whatever forum, international or domestic. The Filipino public needs to understand what's at stake. It's not just ABS-CBN, because, once it happens, look, the fact that this happened, it's not just because they were successful with Sereno. They think they're successful with Rappler. They thought they were successful with the Inquirer. So, every step that this government or any tyrannical government takes to try to diminish our freedoms is a big step against, liberties and human rights.
Another question I asked is the Committee on Legislative Franchises is actually renewed. I think 3 or 4 in the last few days. And yet, they choose not to hear the franchise of ABS-CBN. We've often said that when it comes to, let's say, the court of law, we don't want cases to be sitting more than a year or 2 years. There must be a timetable. Justice delayed is justice denied. But yet, it seems in Congress, it depends on the leadership of that particular Congress, the leadership of the House, to determine when something will be heard. If it's not calendared, frankly, they can sit on it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of calendars, about a week ago, I checked the congress.gov.ph to see the calendars on whether the House Franchise Committee have, or had scheduled ABS-CBN. 2 weeks, none. But other franchise applications, there were scheduled. So, and really, that indicates to you that there's a bigger force at play here. Somebody is telling Alan Cayetano or members of Congress to try to hold the franchise renewal of ABS-CBN, and we clearly see,
I'm curious, Carlos, can the Supreme Court order Congress to actually hear the franchise if you use the equal protection of the law as, a defense?
Well, that can only happen if somebody petitions the Supreme Court. I'm not a lawyer, but but I think that the Supreme Court cannot just, because it's a co-equal thing. The Supreme Court cannot just say Congress, unless it rules on the quo warranto and say we deny this quo warranto and propose to Congress to act on this.
Yeah.
They have to act on a petition.
Okay. Now, Carlos, many have forgotten essentially that this is not the first time there's an attempt to shut down ABS-CBN. The first one was successful the day after martial law was declared in September 21, 1972. ABS-CBN was shut down September 22.
Well, that's a very, I wouldn't even call it ironic. That's just tragic that this thing is happening again. And really, I'm speculating here, but really you have to look back at all the things that have happened under this administration for the past 3 years. If there's one family, for instance, that has been enabled and resuscitated by this government, it's the Marcoses. And it's the Marcoses who shut down ABS-CBN. Now, can you draw a direct line from the Marcoses to what's happening now to ABS-CBN? I don't think so. Again, as I said, I'm speculating. But there are contexts that needed to be taken into account, and one of them is how the Marcoses are back in power and how they've been salivating over, over revenge or over trying to clear their name. And I wouldn't be surprised if ABS-CBN or control of ABS-CBN came up in any of these discussions, because they're back in power. They're very, very close to Duterte, and who knows what sort of machinations have been, have been concocted in this. In
But I think what's important is, while it is reminiscent of martial law, I think what's important is you did say there is no connection with the Marcoses today and ABS-CBN in terms of the attempt to close.
Oh yeah, I mean, as I said,
that's important, so it's fair.
Yeah, I said I was speculating, but the point I was trying to make is that there's this whole political context that needs to be taken. It's not just, where is, like for instance, you have to answer the question, where is the president coming from about his, with these attacks against ABS-CBN? Oh, he accused ABS-CBN of swindling him during the campaign, something that the network denies, and in fact, there hasn't been a case on that one. So, on all other issues. So you have to really, take into account all this. Where is the president coming from? Is it because of the ABS-CBN's coverage of the drug war as much as Rappler, did? It's
okay.
Context.
Senator Grace Poe earlier wanted to hold a hearing on the compliance of ABS-CBN's franchise. The Senate holding a hearing before the House.
That's a very unusual move, but I think it points to the need for answers by, I think the Senate is itself exasperated by what's happening in Congress. The fact that all these, like what, a dozen bills now are not being acted upon by the Senate Franchise Committee. And I think they're exasperated by that because obviously the Senate cannot act if the committee or the House, won't pass this franchise renewal bill. So this is their way of saying to Congress that, look, hurry up because there's something happening.
So you believe
here.
the Senate should push through with it?
Well, I guess it can under the law, under their engaged.
Because in the end, it'll be for public consumption. That's the effect.
But I would like to just hasten people on that one. It is not the job of Congress, of the Senate, to try to determine whether ABS-CBN, for instance, has covered, issues fairly. It's not their job. The job of the Franchise Committee is to see the extent of franchise based on their assessment, or the NTC's government assessment of ABS-CBN's conduct directly relating to the franchise. I mean, were there specific violations of the franchise?
Okay, that's quite interesting. I hope many people catch this. What you're actually saying is the decision to renew a franchise should have nothing to do with the editorial decisions of any network.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It should be separate.
It should be
but
separate.
But then when you hear some officials speak, they did talk about the 2010 coverage, the 2016 coverage. So it's decisions during the election coverage. It's being tied up to the renewal of the franchise.
Well, they have to really
That's very interesting that you said that.
Yeah, but because they have to really find specific violations of the franchise, and there are specific violations of the franchise. And are these, is the conduct of a newsroom or the coverage of the elections?
But who's to decide that? If it's politicians too, no one.
It's supposed to be the public should be the ones to decide that. Under a democracy, no one should be telling you, oh, this news is not fair. The government shouldn't be telling you that this news by ABS-CBN is not fair. But of course, the government says that all the time. And I would also like to point out that it's not also fair for us, for ABS-CBN, to dismiss the government's complaints.
That's true.
But there are forums for that one to try to use these complaints, no matter how valid they are, to try to influence the issuance of the franchise. That's what makes it really egregious. That's what makes it so problematic, and that's why that points to you. Look, franchises, they're not supposed to be used to settle scores. They're supposed to be used to try to determine whether a franchise seeker violated the law and deserves another renewal. If the franchise committee cannot see specific violations of the franchise, it has no choice but to pass the franchise renewal. It cannot say, oh, kasi si Karen Davila was unfair to me when I interviewed her, di ba? I mean, obviously, Kalida can say that because that's exactly what he told Mike Navalio when he said, binabanatan mo ako palagi, as if, being critical of a person in office is a basis for
not renewing a
franchise or taking somebody to court. It's a very, very, I would say, problematic
Okay.
setup.
Well, we don't have enough time, but I want to thank you for you have such interesting insights this morning, especially on the separation of settling scores with franchise renewal. But last words, Carlos, before we go.
Now, last words on this particular issue is that ultimately, this issue is about how the public will support the press freedom. It is not non-negotiable. Either you have it or you don't. And people say, you know, oh, in the Philippines you can still, you know, have press freedom, which is true. I mean, anybody can say anything in this milieu right now, but they're not talking about, for instance, what happens after you said that. What happens after you're critical? Look what happened to Rappler. What happens after when you do your job properly? Look what's happening to Abs-Cbn. And what happens when you criticize a mayor or a governor or a drug lord? You look at how many journalists in the provinces have been killed in the past how many years, you know? So, true, we can say a lot of things, but there are consequences. And that's why Filipinos should be really, you know, mindful about these consequences. That it's not just the freedom of the journalists to say what they want. It's your freedom, it's your right, the public's right, to know what's happening without, you know, blinkers and without being saddled by bias.
On that note, Carlos Conde, I want to thank you so much for coming to Head Start.